Hey, welcome back to another episode of the Good Advice Podcast. We got an amazing guest on today's show. Welcome to our humble little podcast, and I'm excited to share with you this amazing interview with Alexis Scott. She has 80,000 followers on LinkedIn. She is the expert when it comes to content creation, and not just that, but being eternally employable, finding your next career gig, and more importantly, how do you show up on LinkedIn day after day? I love my conversation with Alexis. She's got an amazing story. Before we dive in, though, let's hear a word from one of the amazing businesses that sponsors the podcast. If you ever thought about advertising on the show, you can always reach out, Blake at goodadvicecoaching.com, or support the podcast for as little as the price of a cup of coffee, which these days could be anything, but it's only about $5. You can go to our Patreon, patreon.com/goodadvice. We'll be right back soon. There's one single piece of advice that I give to business owners who are ready to scale their business drastically. And that's knowing exactly what you need to hand off so that you can continue focusing on what you're an expert in. It amazes me when I talk to business owners who are doing their own bookkeeping and tax prep, and worse, that they're going through all this paperwork at 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, even midnight, slaving away trying to make sense of all of the numbers for their business. Business owners who are making it happen have already figured out that you can't do it all yourself. That's why I recommend Steve Lay with Equity Business Solutions. Not only is he an expert in bookkeeping and tax prep, but what I love about Steve is that he'll sit down with you and help you make sense of the value of your business beyond just reading a spreadsheet. You'll be able to make better decisions, and more importantly, you're going to save yourself the crucial time you would have spent going through QuickBooks or an Excel spreadsheet or whatever it is that keeps us up late at night. So save yourself some time and some money by giving Steve Lay a call at Equity Business Solutions, and he'll show you the value beyond your numbers. Go to equitybusinesssolutions.llc.com to find out more. Alexis, it's so great to have you on the podcast today.
Thank you for having me, Blake.
Well, it's always a joy when I should probably have like a more rigid process for all this, but kind of my process for inviting people on is I'm like, yeah, I like that person. They don't seem like a serial killer. Like, come on, you know? But you have over 70,000 followers on LinkedIn. You're on there daily. You have an amazing personal brand. Tell us a little bit about how you got started using social media. And I saw actually you're on TikTok too.
Yeah, that's a new development.
Yeah, isn't it so funny how like TikTok went from like you're not going to use TikTok, that's for like kids, to now so many business people, including myself, are on there. But yeah, tell me about how you kind of got started into social media.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm gonna tailor this to LinkedIn because that's kind of where we're at. But I joined LinkedIn, God, I don't know, 10 years ago. I mean, when it first started, I joined. Now, did I take it seriously? No. I created a profile. I would kind of snoop around and see people I knew on there and what they were up to, if they were even posting, right? Because back then it was even posting. When I landed my role at a company called Vacasa, that was the first team that I had ever led. And I was really excited. So I started posting a little bit, again, just in that excitement of sharing what I was working on and who I was working with. And, oh, we had a training, or, oh, we got to do an outing, or, whatever that looked like in that role. But again, not taking it seriously, just excited and sharing my experiences. And I think you will find that theme in my content even today, that I just get really excited and I like to talk about fun things. In 2020, I lost that job due to COVID. There was a mass layoff, and unfortunately, I was one of those people. And something inside of me just told me, LinkedIn is how you're going to get hired from this mess. And I thought, okay, it's time to start telling my story. So I started posting consistently, and I was just sharing my job search, everything that I was experiencing, conversations that I'd had, things that were interesting to me, unemployment, dealing with the unemployment office, my learnings, all those things were relevant. And so many people were experiencing the same thing at the same time. And so it really resonated. what happened was I started to catch the attention of people. And so I started getting invited on podcasts, and founders were starting to reach out to me and have conversations. And at the time, I didn't understand that I was effectively building what is now called personal brand. That was like a new term. No one really talked
Right.
about it. I ended up getting hired, and the company that I was hired into, I was very lucky that they saw the value in me building my brand alongside their brand. So they were very encouraging for me to continue sharing my story, what I was working on, what they were working on, all of that. And I haven't stopped since.
Isn't it kind of funny how like these things come together where you realize you have like a an insight on something, or like something comes natural to you, or you're building something but you've never named it. Like for me, I was a high school teacher over a
Oh, wow.
decade ago, and I never knew what culture was. Culture is such a buzzword today,
Yeah.
but I did know that Sunday night, I really despised the idea of going to work the next day, not because of my students, but because there were so many just toxic things there. We
Yeah.
had a lot of turnover, but I always think it's interesting when I talk to someone like yourself, where you have something like personal brand that comes very, well, I don't want to say it comes natural in the sense of like you didn't put in the work to be consistent, but you realize you've built something almost after the fact, as opposed to creators who they set out to make something.
Great.
It's like the process can be a little bit different.
Well, I think what is also unique about me is kind of how you and I were chatting before this conversation in our prep session of like, what exactly do you want to talk about? Because you're dabbling in all of these different things. And I think that that is something that differentiates me from most creators, is I talk about a lot of things. And they evolve along with
Hmm.
me, my career. Like my career is absolutely not linear. I have not been doing the same thing for 100 years. I've rebranded multiple times, particularly in the last 4 years,
Uh-huh.
heavy on change.
Yeah.
And the way that I approach this is actually not, this is going to sound terrible, but it is not the strategic way in which to build your brand. There is a strategic way.
Hmm.
And I teach people the strategic way. I think that I'm a little bit different in kind of my purpose, my goal, but I am common in the sense of the doors that it has opened up for me. When you are willing to invest, and also I have not been concerned with the speed at which I'm doing this. Like some people are like, in a year, I want to be at X number of followers. In a year, this is my goal. I don't have goals like that. I just want to be myself. I want to talk about what's interesting to me. And I really want to connect with people who my content resonates with, which is also why I talk about various things. I think a lot of people connect with me because they feel a little bit of themselves in the vulnerability and stuff that I am willing to share. And maybe they're a little bit afraid to say that stuff. So it's a little bit different there between like really strategic content creators and then myself, who are like, I don't know, I'm just telling you my story.
You're very genuine. And it kind of makes me think of, and this is especially true for many of our listeners who are entrepreneurs who have had a variety of side hustles. And I think sometimes there is this level, I think sometimes social media makes it so simple where like someone just, they tell the story and they tell the whole story in like one sentence. Like it should be this easy. And then you look at your own life and you're like, this is a mess. Like I've had so many different things happening. But I think hearing your story, I think a lot of people listening can sometimes miss the nuance of, it's less about that very simple path, and it's more about really recognizing your values and like what you bring to the table, and then that will then morph. Because for you, I've always personally, I say always, I haven't known you more than maybe 4 or 5 months, but from the times I've engaged with you and looked at your content, that authenticity, for example, is really obvious. That genuineness, um, you have a value of the way you do business, and I think sometimes I don't want to say we underappreciate that, but we definitely sometimes kind of scoot past that to like, why is it not happening faster? And you've built some pretty incredible things. I really, for our listeners, I first met Alexis through a mutual friend, Steve Blair, who's a friend of the podcast, who's come on the podcast. But a lot of like HR and culture conversations and leadership conversations. So your expertise is definitely very wide and very deep. But I definitely appreciate the way you do business And that's why I had reached out originally to bring you on the podcast. So,
well, thank you. And I think, what is interesting to me, I'm in a period of transition right now. A business venture that I was a part of, I am no longer a part of now. And so I'm trying to kind of figure out yet again, in which direction do I want to move? The nice thing is because I have a vast set of experiences and expertise, I get to pick and I get to kind of figure out where do I want to go next. Now, with that said, you run into the challenges of traditional corporate America, which is we want someone with X number of years of experience versus we want someone who is knowledgeable, has strong business acumen, has great connections. And there are some employers who value that. And I will tell you, they are few and far between. I have friends sending me job descriptions and I kind of chuckle and I send them back and I say, well, technically, I'm not qualified for this. I don't have 10 years of X experience, or I don't have 20 in this industry, or, whatever it may look like. But if you rip that job description to shreds and you look at, okay, how many businesses have you started? How many leadership positions have you been in? How many programs have you built? I'm more than qualified. And so I think there's something to be said for being able to articulate your value without arbitrary numbers. Now, keep in mind, I'm not saying by any means like you should not be able to articulate results. That's very different.
Sure.
Absolutely should, and you need to, because that is how you are going to get someone to see your value. The proof is in the pudding. It's what have you achieved and accomplished. But there is a whole nother set of, like you're saying, culture and values and authenticity, and even just being easy to work with. Like that's a big thing. I was talking about that with someone the other day, and I'm like, I have never received feedback that I'm hard to work with. So I'm going to take it that I'm easy to work with.
Yeah. And, you mentioned it a moment ago of like, I almost hate using the word pivot because it's like someone saying like, oh, I'm so authentic. It's like one of those overused buzzwords.
Buzzword. I hear you.
But definitely, and I think this is true in like the entrepreneurial world, where what you set out to do is not what ends up happening. Or it's like there's like a very jarring change, or the company that was funding you literally the next day like goes under, or what have you. You mentioned in 2020, which was obviously a total year of chaos, year and more of chaos for many of us. Without me essentially using the word pivot, but talking about pivoting, like what's your appetite for appreciating, I was going this way and now I'm going somewhere totally different. Like, do you typically bounce back pretty quick from that, or like, what does that look like for you?
I will tell you, the more connected and the more vocal I am with my story, the easier it has become. So for example, with this pivot, I was devastated with our business, or with me leaving the business. Essentially, the business still exists. It was not what I thought was going to happen when I went into the venture. I thought for sure that I kept saying out loud, we are going to be on a magazine cover someday. I really thought, I believed that. And 6 months later, that was not the case. And I was so upset. And I thought, you know what? People are going to be wondering what the heck is going on. I need to say something. So how am I going to do this? And that morning, I was so scared to make that post and to share. I was just like, oh my God, here we go again. By that afternoon, I had, I don't know how many phone calls scheduled. Right. I had people reaching out. I still have people reaching out. And I'm very grateful and very fortunate, but that is not due to the fact that I simply made a post. It is due to the years of deposits that I have made into those relationships, and the years that I have proven that I can do things and that I know things. And so I think that my appetite for it is it's not fun by any means, don't get me wrong, but I definitely am confident in myself and the fact that I will survive and I will be even more successful. Like when I look at the opportunities that have come my way now, I'm like, wow, I hadn't even considered that. Like, I think that's the other thing that you need to understand is that when your plans change, you are making space for something that you may have never even considered.
I
and
love
it's
that.
brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant because these new ideas and these new opportunities can be even better than what you had imagined.
And how do you navigate? I mean, I guess it's building that network, right? But I know
Mhm.
one of the common things that gets brought up by listeners of the podcast is how lonely entrepreneurship is, and I've
Mhm.
felt that too. I mean, I'm a very social
Oh,
person.
yeah.
I love connecting with people, and it was very jarring the first day of my business, which was almost 6 years ago. Like waking up, coming into my office, and being like, so what do I do exactly? But that lack
Yeah.
of community, especially like when you lose a customer you never thought you were going to lose, or you had a sale that you were for sure this is a lock, and then it doesn't happen, or there's a variety of things that can happen. Is your network like your go-to, or are there other things that you've sort of curated or leveraged to sort of navigate setbacks?
My network is my go-to. I mean, I have some entrepreneurial friends. I have a lot of entrepreneurial friends at this point, who really understand what it's like.
Mhm.
And being able to call them, text them, talk to them, and just, I mean, I have one friend he's going through it right now. And, I check on him often. And, one day you're like on the top of the world. You're like, oh my God, I got these leads and it's going to close. I just know it. And then something falls through and it's like, oh my God, what am I going to do next?
Mhm.
And I think that it's the highs and the lows that make it really, really hard. For me, the loneliness was something that I experienced when I first started the Fairy Job Mom. That was kind of my shock to my
Mhm.
system. I think I'm a little bit used to it now and have managed to create a cadence of communication with others that I talk to people frequently, whether it's on LinkedIn. I have some Slack communities I'm a part of. I have friends that I text or call if I'm sad or lonely, or if I need advice. I mean, that's the other thing too, whether it be personal advice or business advice. I kind of have my board of directors on tap, and that keeps me connected. Without that, I would be heartbroken. I'm a people person. So it is very hard. And that's also probably why I'm on LinkedIn so much, because that is my social network. That is people who are interested in what I'm interested, who want to talk about what I want to talk about, who are business minded and focused and going places. And so they always say, like, surround yourself with people who are going where you're going. And so that's what I've done.
It's been very interesting, very cool on LinkedIn. The number of people I've built relationships with who I've never, like, I
Yeah.
almost have closer entrepreneurial friends on LinkedIn than I do in real life. And it's not something that I necessarily expected from the get go. Um, do you have a lot of people who like they want like social media advice, or like do you have people who I kind of think of the person who like they try like social media, they do like one post and they're like it doesn't work, you know?
Yeah.
Like how do you kind of help people have the right expectations for it?
Well, I think too, you get out what you put in. So that's the first one. And I help founders and executives with ghostwriting and something that I call content optimization. So ghostwriting is for the people who are like, ugh, I know this is important. I just don't have the time, and or I hate writing. I don't want to write, but I have something to say. So
Mhm.
that's where I come in and I actually write for them. And we talk about all their ideas, and I craft compelling LinkedIn posts to build their profile. Now, the content optimization is interesting because it's a done with you process. So
Mhm.
I'm not writing for you, you're writing for yourself, but I'm helping guide you to make sure that your posts are optimized and they're going to get as much reach as possible, and, kind of teach
Do you,
you the strategy behind it.
and do you have people who because one thing that's been really interesting for me, like I get a lot of people who reach out and ask about podcasting, and they have I don't want to call it like a corporate approach, but they have like a very rigid in you think about corporate America, how a lot of times how ideation happens is it's not necessarily like a full whiteboard. It's like, hey, we have legal involved, marketing, what have you. Like there's like these guardrails there. And
Yeah.
I've noticed people often kind of have the same approach of like, what's the prescriptive thing to do? And naturally, you have, when you write content and you work with your customers, I'm sure you have like the things that you go to, but also you're very authentic and genuine.
Mhm.
So I know for me, when people ask for help on the podcast and they have like, and maybe I don't know if this is good business or not, but they're like, hey, should I have a script? And I'm like, I don't use a script. I'm just like, this is what I think, and I always can kind of sense the tension of, being intentional with what you're saying, but also being you. Is that making
Yeah.
sense? Do you ever have that
Oh, it is.
conversation with
And
your people?
that's something that we go through. I mean, we identify content pillars. So it's like, what do you want to be known for? What do you
Right.
want to talk about? What is interesting to you? And that is important. Um,
Do you ever have people who, because I run into this also, and I don't mean to keep interrupting you, by the way, but
okay.
the nature of a conference call, right? Do you ever have people who are unsure of what their content pillar, like they know their job or they know like their industry, but when it comes down to like, what do I want to be known for? It feels like that's a really hard first step for a lot of people.
I mean, you're looking at one. And so I approach it for myself. Again, this is not the best thing, but I approach it with I'm an evolving human. I'm growing and learning.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm going to talk about what I'm working on right now. Now, there is nothing that says you can't pick something and then just pivot. Pivot, the word pivot, right? Like maybe you're in a role that is interesting to you and then you change jobs and you're in a new industry and you want to talk about that. There is absolutely nothing that says you cannot do that.
Mm-hmm.
And so the other thing that I tell people is listen, we're going to plan out your content, but if there is something top of mind for you, or if you are experiencing something, or if you are attending an event, or there is something that you want to share more than a prescribed post, please do that.
Mm-hmm.
This is not the Bible. This is not set in stone. I mean, this is your content and your story.
Right.
Really encourage people to share what they are passionate about. I have one client who he is in copywriting and we had kind of planned out his content pillars. I made a content calendar for him and he's like, I really want to go deep on whatever. Is that okay? Of course it's okay. I don't have that depth of knowledge or that subject matter expertise to say, you should really write a post about whatever it is, right? But if there is something that you're passionate about and excited about, that's the best content because that
Mm-hmm.
comes through in your writing. It's when we are writing generalized kind of ho-hum stuff that people are like not interested, scroll past.
Yeah.
People can sense things in your writing. And it's really interesting. It happened to me the other day. Someone messaged me and said, are you okay? And I'm like, I'm fine. I mean, I'm fine, but I am going through stuff in my life. A business is breaking apart. My dog died the other day. Like I am going through stuff. And I found it impressive that he could read through the professional posts and hear me and sense that. So again, that is a point of connection with people.
Mm-hmm.
So find those commonalities. Again, sharing your story, getting excited about things. That's the best way to connect with people. And that flexibility of like, I don't need to post. I used to post about sales all the time. Am I still passionate about sales? Yes. Do I still sell every day? Yes, I do. I am not in the nitty gritty of sales training anymore.
Mm-hmm.
My content has evolved.
Yeah, and I think permission to change is, you mentioned that you're an evolving human. I think sometimes people, I don't say like feel bad necessarily, but like it does seem like some people are very, like you have to be known for this one thing. And if you deviate, then you're hurting yourself. Cause I think about my own career path, like 10 years ago, being this high school teacher and coming out of that, almost everything I posted about was about leadership and culture. And I still care tremendously about that kind of stuff. But, today I do post a lot about sales and marketing only because I'm more it's more out of annoyance of like, here's another DM about,
Yeah.
they spelled my name wrong, even though it's right there, like things like that, where, it's always kind of funny to me. But something else go ahead.
Oh, sorry. No, I just want to piggyback on that. And I think, the other question you need to ask yourself is what is for the purpose of what? Like, why are you doing this? For me, I post about a lot of things. I also had someone tell me yesterday after he booked a discovery call with me and he's like, so what exactly do you do?
Hmm.
And I'm like, let me tell you the things I do. And he's like, yeah, I've been following you for years. And he's like, you've done a lot of things. And I'm like, yeah, I know. I know. Now, if my intention was to be solely focused on one thing, I would shift.
Mm-hmm.
If I wanted to grow my career in sales and become a VP of sales and be sales, I would, but I'm not interested in that. And I think that there are people who are interested in that. And
Mm-hmm.
if you have a very distinct interest and career path that you are focused on, then yes, focusing your content on that will get you to where you want to go. For me, it's more about connection. It's more about opportunities. It's more about having interesting conversations and meeting interesting people and following my passions. Like I don't need to have just one. You should see my shampoo collection in my shower. I've got like 45 because I like variety. I like a lot of things. And in the past, I have been told multiple times, you need to niche down. You need to niche down. And again, yes, if I had, a very specific, like I want to be X in X industry and
Mhm.
blah, 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 then I would, but I'm done feeling bad about that. And I think there's a lot of advice out there that makes you feel bad
Mhm.
if you don't have that corporate ladder title that you're following, or if you're figuring things out. Again, we evolve.
Mhm.
So like if you had had this conversation with me 2 years ago, my goals were very different.
Well, I'm a big fan. I was talking to a customer a couple weeks ago, and the way he framed it was he runs like a accounting company, and there was a comment he made of like, "Yeah, I know I'm supposed to niche down, but I'm not. I'm not going to." And I'm a fan of like these things that seem a little counterintuitive, but or kind of rub against the grain a little bit. In the sense of it does sometimes feel like we're so quick to like throw out these like pithy niches make riches and like these little things that are kind of like these maxims that we really kind of like stick to and then we like comment them on other people's posts and you kind of lose the nuance of what it actually means
They're
to run a
true.
business.
I mean, like I think as I get older, I start to see the world in a very gray tone, right? More than one thing can be true.
Hmm.
You can be successful and make a lot of money by niching down. Yes, you absolutely can. And if you know how, you can also make a lot of money by not niching down,
Hmm.
serving many people. Now, with that said, there's different strategies involved. I think the
Right.
other thing too about niching down is if you are just starting in business, be very careful.
Hmm.
You niche down and you don't like that niche, that's a problem because now you have tailored everything to that niche. And what do you do? So when we started my marketing company, I always like I told myself in my head, like I'm in the playground and I have a sifter and we're putting stuff in and we're shaking it out and we're seeing what rocks I can find that I like.
Hmm.
And then I want to find more of those. And you start to become more clear on kind of where you fit in this massive picture. What are the services that you like doing? What are the services that you can do, but you're like, I don't really love that. Or what are the industries that you're like, I mean, I can help you because I know about that, but I'm not really passionate about that. Like you start to see these different things, and the only way you can see them is through living and learning and having those experiences. Like you can think whatever you want to think, but you don't know until you actually do it.
And it's funny how, and I think a big part of this process is like leaning into your customer and letting them sort of guide, like, hey, this is the thing that really resonates with me. For me, I've had this consulting company for almost 6 years now, and it's been a real grind. And then this last week, I started a podcast company, and it's been amazing. The people who are like, "Oh, you're so good at that," whereas the consulting company are like, "Yeah, you still do that thing," and I'm like, "Yeah, it is a full time job, but
Yeah.
sure." But it is funny how like public perception and like customers and like people who like they really sometimes can really lead you and sort of direct you on things that they see about you that maybe to yourself seem kind of either mundane or normal or just like I guess we don't always realize our own genius in those
Yeah.
situations.
And I think too, like for me, for example, I tend to fall into the camp of wanting to do too much, right? One person, one problem. I do
Mhm.
believe that. The challenge becomes when you want a portfolio career, right? I want to have consulting clients, but I also want to have fairy job mom clients. They're
Mhm.
two very different services. Um, but they fit, each one fits in its own bucket. So it's like, how do you market each if you are your brand? So that is a real challenge. But I also think that, like you said, listening to your clients. I mean, I have my ghostwriting and content optimization clients. That's where we start. That's always point A on how I start working with people. But then once they start working with me and they see how I work and they hear my experiences or my expertise, we're having conversations about their business and I'm offering tidbits, I'm dropping little breadcrumbs. It leads to, hey, can you help me with this?
Mhm.
Now I have a full-fledged consulting client because yes, Mary, I absolutely can help you with that. But that's not what I'm going to broadcast to everybody. Like here,
Mhm.
here's all the 85 things I can do for you. Let's start at point A.
Mhm.
Let's see if we like working together. You can learn a little bit about me. I can learn a little bit about you. And then we expand. So land and expand. That's real and it works. And that's how you get sticky clients.
I love that. Well, Alexis, this has been an awesome conversation today. We are out of time. It always goes by quick.
Yeah.
I've so appreciated you coming on today. What's for somebody listening who they want to connect with you or maybe even work with you? What's the best next step for them?
Well, you can head to my website, which is thefairyjobmom.com. But I would highly, highly, highly recommend you connecting with me on LinkedIn. My name on there is Alexis Rivera Scott, or just search The Fairy Job Mom on LinkedIn. You'll find me there too. But yeah, would love to chat. For this particular instance, and on my Fairy Job Mom website, executive ghostwriting and or content optimization / personal branding is where I could be most helpful.
Alexis, thank you for taking the time to come on the show today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. It was really fun.
Hey, for our listeners, I'll put the link to Alexis's LinkedIn on the in the episode description, as well as the link to her website, The Fairy Job Mom. That'll be in the description for you to click on. And if you've been listening to this podcast and you enjoy the podcast, maybe you're a first-time listener, what the heck are you waiting on? Click the subscribe button and the follow button so you can keep getting good advice wherever you are. Don't forget, if you ever thought about advertising or sponsoring a podcast, you can always reach out at blake@goodadvicecoaching.com, or you can support the podcast on our Patreon, patreon.com/goodadvice, for as little as the price of a cup of coffee, which is $5, not today's version of a cup of coffee. So all that to say, thank you so much to all of you who support the podcast. That's today's good advice. We'll catch you later. See ya.